So, moving along, we have a stellar panel on leading from the front, the Humanitarian Vanguard, co-moderated by Adelina Kamal and Emma Beals, and CHL's Mariana McGlasson will lead the Q&A following the panel. So to properly introduce our moderators, Adelina Kamal is an independent analyst with more than 25 years experience with the ASEAN, where she led the Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance as its executive director from 2017 to 2021. Prior to that, she worked with ASEAN's headquarters in Jakarta for over 2 decades. Adelina is a steering committee member of the Southeast Asian Women's Peace Mediators and serves as a consultant for local, regional, and international organizations in the area of disaster management, humanitarian assistance, crisis management, health, and public funding. Adelina is also a member of CHL's board, an advisory group member of the London-based Overseas Development Institute for Humanitarian Policy Group, and an early member of the Association of Indonesian Society for Amnesty International. Adelina will be co-moderating alongside Emma Beals, independent consultant who joined the European Institute of Peace, or EIP, as a senior advisor in 2018. As a consultant, Emma is focused on Syria and based between the EU and the Middle East. She is a non-resident scholar at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and a former visiting fellow of the Atlantic Council's DFR Lab, as well as the co-founder and editor of Syria in Context, a weekly English briefing and Arabic publication. Since 2012, she's covered Syria as a journalist for a range of publications and as a researcher and policy advisor for think tanks, INGOs, UN agencies, with a particular focus on peace building, refugee return, reconstruction, and more. Emma and Adelina, welcome, and I invite you to introduce your panelists.
Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum. Again, my name is Adelina Kamal, and I'm pleased to co-moderate this session with Emma Beals. If you don't know who Emma Beals is, check out her website, www.emmabeals.com, where she published her work, both journalism work as well as analysis work on peace building, humanitarian conflict, and so many other things. But of course, thank you so much, Mariana, for inviting us to co-design session. Mariana will moderate the Q&A session. Well, let's get to the point. We have talked enough about localization and decolonizing aid. I personally don't like the word decolonizing. Anyway, we are not going to debate about what localization means and what decolonizing aid means, because the why is clear. Now we have to move to the next stage. There is turning theories into action and solidarity into strategy. And no other than there's no one better positioned to answer the question, the how, than those who are living the crisis, who are not only the frontliners, but also at the center stage, in the middle, right and left, and very often carrying the entire response on their shoulders. For me, they are not only the leaders, they are transformers. Emma Beals said to me that they are the vanguard. They are everything. They are dismantling the rigid sectorization between humanitarianism, development, human rights, and peace. They are developing new norms, notably solidarity, ingenuity, and adaptability. They are rewriting what response, recovery, and resilience should look like. And we are deeply honored to have the leaders from 4 contexts of crisis: Myanmar, Sudan, Syria, and Ukraine. Now, I should say that these 4 crises are not distant emergencies. They are very personal to me, especially the one happening in Myanmar. They are unfolding as we speak. Bombs are dropping. Aid is being blocked, politicized, and manipulated, Norms are eroding. International responses too often are either too loud, too noisy, and sidelining the local actors, as well as the voices of those affected, or delayed and disturbingly absent. The Myanmar people have had it enough. I came here to the conference being very angry, and I want to find an answer. And I hope that I will find the answer from the discussion by listening to them, by learning from them. But the reality is that these local actors are often sidelined, first by volume and then by silenced. And I should also say, many who were meant to be with us here today, Mariana and I and the organizers tried to get them here. Many women and other frontliners that we invited couldn't make it, not because they lack leadership, not because their voice don't matter, but because the barriers are too high, then it's on the ground too great. Sorry, I got personal. But I think we have the right to be angry because that anger fueled me. And there are also many other neglected crises that are not featured today in this panel. Anyway, let's invite our VIP. The speakers. Salai Zauk, please come. Salai Zauk Ling, Executive Director of the 30-year-old Chin Human Rights Organization, CHRO. He has devoted his entire adult life to CHRO, leading a team of 130 people operating in some of the most remote and repressed areas in Myanmar. CHRO, also known for their work documenting serious human rights violations, and in recent years, it has also taken on an expanded role addressing humanitarian crisis after the 2021 military coup. CHRO is also the only Myanmar-based human rights organization with the UN ECOSOC special consultative status, bringing powerful combination of grassroots, live first-hand experience from the ground and international advocacy. Thank you, Sarah Zauk, for coming. Ross Skowronski, please come. Founder and CEO of Mission Kharkiv, Ukraine, an organization delivering sustainable life-saving medication to Ukraine's most vulnerable population. By the way, Ross has a Master of Science in Applied Mathematics. His passion is to use his mathematical expertise. He's developing algorithms to make meaningful impact through his academic and community services. Please follow his LinkedIn. I am very impressed with his recent posts. The most recent ones are we ruled by the dumb? Independence. Those teaching Mission Kharkiv about independence now had to halt their work due to their dependence on political decisions, and also on moving beyond the localization buzzword. Welcome. Can I invite Awad Mohammed, representing the emergency room response rooms in Sudan? Awad is the founding member and representative of the medical office of the old Omdurman ERR, and starting in the humanitarian sector first as a volunteer at the Nafir 2013 flood crisis, and also a pharmacist. I think you know enough about ERRs. It's the perfect embodiment of mutual aid and helping one another in crisis. Can I invite Safaa Elagib Adam? a peace and gender activist, founding member and president of the Community Development Association. Safaa has worked several decades with national and international organizations in Sudan in development and humanitarian work, part of regional and international networks on women, peace and security, a board member and member of many organizations and networks. I cannot name each of them. Deeply involved in the peace processes, including peace talk and negotiation, a peace mediator, a community mobilizer, one of those 1,000 women peace builders nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005 and 2009. Ahmed, Ekzayez, the chief of program at the Syria Civil Defense, known as the White Helmets. Prior to joining White Helmets, Ahmed worked for the Syria Recovery Trust Fund, managing all food security and livelihood projects in North Syria. And before that, working as consultant and advisor at various UN agencies and NGOs, leading food security agriculture projects in Turkey, Bangladesh, Nigeria, and Uganda. His professional journey started when he did research focusing on plant epidemiology to address epidemics that pose a global threat to global food security. So Ahmed, a plant disease epidemiologist turned into conflict prevention, negotiation, transitional justice expert, and now a white helmet. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a human rights activist, a peace mediator, a plant disease epidemiologist turned into white helmet, a mathematician, and a pharmacist. And now I will invite the former award-winning journalist Emma Beals to throw them questions. Over to you.
Thanks, Adelina. As Adelina said, we're really happy to have co-created this panel together and with Mariana. And our assumption was that we don't need to convince you that local action is important or legitimate because you all know it, you all do that. Like we're starting from that assumption. And we're going to get into more sophisticated discussions about the similarities, some of the really transformative or specific or unique things that are happening in each of these contexts. And sort of more into the nexus and post-conflict environments and really drawing on what makes each of these interventions really, really important. There's obviously a lot to be very upset about in each of the contexts that folks are working in, but talking to people working in mutual aid across these contexts has been a source of deep joy and inspiration for me personally over the last couple of years. I move in all sorts of rooms doing peace and policy with some people who think that they're very, very important and have all of the solutions to our problems. But it has been the people in mutual aid and local action where I have felt the most inspired, where I've seen people who have multi-generational visions for their work, for their societies, for their countries, who understand that community accountability means showing up in your community, working with them and actually achieving real solutions. It's not a survey at the end of your project that sort of says, oh, you did a nice job and you asked us what we thought. They understand sort of that representation and governance is actually service provision as well, that these things are all intrinsically linked. And this is where we'll get into some of the nexus element as well. And that community action is community resilience and recovery as well, that these things are all linked. These aren't siloed buzzwords that sort of happen. And that's why we're kind of rejecting other buzzwords like localization. So these solutions aren't all the same thing, obviously. The contexts are different. There's many similarities. We have people dealing with disasters in conflict zones. We have access issues across these various contexts. But there's also really unique things happening as well. But there's not enough opportunity for solidarity and for cross-contextual learning between actors. And that's what we're hoping that this discussion will serve as much as anything, is folks being able to share their experiences, learn from each other, ask each other questions, and take those things back. That's how Adelina and I met, was sort of cross-context learning between Syria and Myanmar. We've found that really valuable, and we're hoping that folks here do as well. So I'll start with you. We'll go to Myanmar first. we're seeing over the last few days, actors in Myanmar dealing with a major earthquake as well as the fallout of a civil war. Previously, we had a cyclone, another disaster to deal with, as well as a humanitarian crisis, particularly in the areas outside of junta control. Can you give us a bit of an overview about how you as an organization and some of your peers are responding to needs, and what sort of are the challenges that you're facing?
Thank you, Emma. Just to start off with, because Myanmar, as I prefer to call it, Burma still, you might not have a very good picture of the country situation, the background. So I'll start with a little bit of background. We're dealing with a military regime that took power in a violent coup 4 years ago. And we've been dealing with, ever since independence, a succession of military regimes. So Burma has rarely been displayed on the screen on TV. But the problem that we've been dealing with in Burma is not just the latest round of caused by the earthquake or natural disaster. It is only compounding to the existing problem, and that's why it's so important that the international community pay attention closely to what's happening in Burma. So yesterday, I think it was Cheyenne who talked about what's next in their discussion within their organization. And that reminds me of what we've been asking ourselves every day, what's next? Because the problem keeps compounding. Just when we thought that we have seen the worst, one after another disaster strike in our country, yet there's very little attention being paid to the people of Burma. So in that context, it is not just the natural disaster that we're dealing with. The root of the problem goes much beyond. And we've seen the cost of natural disaster because we've been dealing with them. And every time that the disaster strikes in Burma, we have a situation in which we have to deal with the military first before we get to the disaster victims, or before relief work can begin. And every time the military regime, in whatever it forms, the latest of which is known as the State Administration Council, they have responded to this disaster by trying to prevent the flow of aid. Now, this is the first time they have publicly called international aid, and which was surprising, given that they have in the past refrained from doing so, just because they are afraid of international scrutiny. But this time around, it's different. They are very quick in calling for international aid, and the reason is no other than the fact that they are very desperate, because for the last 4 years, they've been surrounded from all sides. The people revolted overwhelmingly, and 4 years later, they're finding themselves surrounded by the resistant force, and they are confining themselves to the central part of the country where the disaster now strikes. And they are finding themselves in a situation where they could no longer fight in the front line or win any battle. And they are heavily reliant on air power to kill civilians, to destroy lives in the areas that is controlled by the resistant forces, to dismantle the institutions that and the infrastructure that's being restarted outside of their control. And they bombed civilian gatherings, they bombed churches, they bombed hospitals. Now, even after the disastrous strike on the 28th of February, March, they have launched at least 30 separate airstrikes, even places very close to the epicenter of the disaster. And this is a military regime that is trying to survive, and survival for themselves first and for the people. They're just killing civilians. So when you think about Burma as needing international aid and rapid response, we very much appreciate any help that you can provide. However, we must warn that working with the military entails great risk, because as past experience tell us that aid money is often being used to fund their own military campaign against the people. And now that they are more desperate than before, the use of international aid money towards funding military operations and airstrikes, indiscriminate airstrikes against civilians, is much higher now. So please don't be complicit in that by being naive about this regime, because they are very, very calculated in their strategy, where they would invite international aid, pretend that they are doing something with it, only, it's been discovered that military personnel who are said to be responding to the rescue efforts are only standing around holding their guns, preventing people from responding, not actually engaged in the actual work. So this regime is very desperate, and we should not be complicit in its actions, and that's very important. While we appreciate all the help that especially the philanthropy organizations are contributing, we can't do much about how governments are responding, because they tend to work directly with the existing state mechanisms and institutions, which are there just to make sure that aid doesn't get to where they need, and the military gets all the money. So please be mindful of the fact that your otherwise well-intent money and funding is spent by working with local groups. Now we have more territories being controlled by the resistant forces, and that's where civil society and public services are mushrooming, and new administration are emerging, new types of liberation, newfound liberation is growing. That's where we need the support, and the military is jealous of that, and they keep on bombing those places to make sure that any kind of alternative governance emerging from different parts of the country stand no chance. So while I would be answering more questions if we still have time, I think the message coming from the ground is that please do refrain from working directly with the military regime, because that would be signing a death penalty for the civilians population. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really important framing of the pressure that folks are under and the areas where local groups are really thriving in so many different places. I'm sure some of those reflections really resonated with others on the panel. We'll come back to you for a little more detail on how local groups are working, but it brings us really nicely to the next question for you, Ross, which is humanitarians working in these areas at a local level are often called sort of humanitarian resistance because they seem to be or perceived to be aligned with one side of a conflict, and humanitarians sort of reject that and say that they're aligned with people and needs, and that that's actually what's happening. Now you are working in Ukraine, Ross, and we heard a little bit about what you've been posting on LinkedIn as well. So you're perfect to answer this question. You know, you're responding to needs across Ukraine, including in places like Kharkiv. Can you talk a little bit about how that work was conceived and how you think about some of these issues around independence
Yeah, I'm a mathematician. Before the full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine in 2022, I was a student and research assistant in Madrid Autonomous University. I came just 1 month before Russia attacked. It was just a family visit. I was supposed to stay in a relaxed environment. But in 1 month, I found myself establishing and helping establishing logistic chains. And one thing turned to another, and in 2 months, an oncology hospital was bombarded in Kharkiv, and we received lots of requests at that time. And at that time, we had no idea that it will be very difficult to fundraise during an emergency response for such cause as saving oncology patients, because so far, it's never considered a priority during emergency response. But what we strongly believe is that it's part of this actually colonial narrative of having this standard colonial response to emergency. And I believe we should be shifting to some more diverse relief response in contemporary world. We become actually quite successful. That's how we became. Mission Kharkiv became the first NGO in the world to provide full course chemotherapy treatments in cities under siege, because we didn't care that it will be difficult to fundraise. We did not just focused on what will be accepted on proposals. We were focusing on what was actually needed on the ground. So turning to the principles, right? It's true. I'm a humanitarian only for 3 years, so I have this side perspective from academia, right? So the INGOs came to Ukraine and they taught us the principles, and particularly the independence principle. And in a couple of years, they shut down their operations due to actual dependence. So in terms of neutrality and impartiality, Mission Kharkiv is adhering to the humanitarian standards. The problem is that we would love to work on the opposite side of the temporarily occupied territories by Russia in the front line. The problem is that we are not accepted on the other side. We would love to go there, but not only local NGO or national NGO are accepted. Actually, INGOs are not accepted to work from the other side as well. So the concept of neutrality in the Ukrainian setting is actually irrelevant at the end. We say that we are neutral, but we are neutral not because of our choice, but because it's it is so. Yeah. So yeah, that's my answer for the standard principles.
I think also notable, I attended a workshop at Partnerships Week last year on developing a sort of best practices for working under siege. And aside from me, every single person attending, which was only 6 out of the whole Partnerships Week, was a local responder who had been working in siege. So these developing areas of practice are really coming from people like yourself who are doing the work, you know, on the ground to overcome some of those barriers that we're seeing more and more of. Siege is something that is happening more in these contexts. I want to turn to Sudan now. Awad, we've heard that the emergency response rooms are a very special example of mutual aid. It's not only highly localized and responsive, but it includes tens of thousands, 10,000, I think, across the country now in a networked system. So hearing a little bit more just about how that works would be a really useful place to start. And I think Awad is going to respond in Arabic. So get your headphones out if you do need the translation.
السلام عليكم جميعا. في البداية نحب نشكر اللجنة المنظمة وكل الموجودين على إتاحة الفرصة. وحقيقة أنا أشعر بكمية كبيرة من الفخر والسعادة إنه أنا أتكلم اليوم وأتحدث بلسان أكثر من 2000 متطوع في السودان هنا. بيقيفوا على الوضع المأساوي اللي بيعيش فيه الشعب السوداني حاليا. يمكن الناس تكون سمعت عدد كبير من المرات إنه حرب السودان هي حرب منسية، والحاجة دي لأنه نفتكر إنه ما يحدث على الأرض ما هو الموجود على الميديا أو على الوسائط المتاحة، من كمية الفظائع والانتهاكات اللي ارتكبت في حق المدنيين الموجودين في السودان. يمكن هي الناس تكون سمعت بأنه السودان حاليا هو أكبر مشكلة بتاعت نزوح ولجوء حصلت في الفترة الأخيرة. آخر تقديرات اتقالت إنه أكثر من 8 مليون هم نازحين، وقرابة أو أكثر من 3 مليون هم لاجئين. فيمكن دي ممكن تعمل شوية توضيح للشكل اللي بيعيش فيه الناس، خلاف لكل الانتهاكات من القتل والنهب والسرقة والاغتصاب وإلى آخره. الفكرة بتاعت غرف الطوارئ أو غرف الاستجابة السريعة في السودان هي ممكن نسميها حاجة قديمة من الإرث والعادات والتقاليد السودانية. عندنا حاجة من أعظم العادات والتقاليد بتاعتنا اللي هي بنسميها النفير. فالنفير ده مستوحى من زمان، يعني من بدايات السودان، في إنه لما يكون في شخص في الحي أو في المدينة محتاج لمساعدة بيجتمعوا كل الناس ويساعدوه. المساعدة دي ممكن تكون في الحصاد، ممكن تكون في البناء، ممكن تكون في كل الأشغال الحياتية العادية يعني. فمن الفكرة بتاعت النفير دي تكونت الفكرة بتاعت غرف الطوارئ. يمكن غرف الطوارئ أو غرف الاستجابة السريعة في السودان هي في جزء كبير منها كان مشكل أصلا قبل اندلاع الحرب في 23. يمكن جزء من الغرف كان أنشئ في الفترة بتاعت الكوفيد، أو بيساعدوا كان في التوصيل بتاع المساعدات وغيره في الفترة اللي كان فيها انتشار لوباء الكوفيد. الاستيحاء بتاع التشكيل بتاع المحلية بتاعت غرف الطوارئ زي ما قلت هي مستوحاة من النفير، ومستوحاة من برضو التشبيك والتشكيل اللي كان تم عن طريق لجان المقاومة اللي اتعملت برضو، وهو برضو شكل من أشكال النفير والمساعدة إنه الناس بتتجمع في حاجة واحدة. المميز في غرف الطوارئ في السودان أو في غرف الاستجابة السريعة في السودان هي اتعدت المحلية لأعمق من ذلك كثير، بأنها هي بتبدأ من الأحياء. يعني ما بس إنه والله غرف الطوارئ هي بتشكل السودان، لا، نحن ممكن نلقى في أقصى أصغر حي في السودان في غرفة بتاع الطوارئ. زي ما قلت العدد بتاع المتطوعين ممكن يكون أكثر من 2000 متطوع في غرف الطوارئ موجودين. بيبدأ السيستم أو الهيكل بتاع غرف الطوارئ من الأحياء الصغيرة جدا، بأنه يكون في غرفة بتاع الطوارئ في الحي، بيترفع منها ممثلين يمثلوا في المجلس بتاع القطاع ده اللي هو بيضم عدد من الأحياء بتكون موجودة بتمثل في شكل بتاع مجلس. من كل غرفة طوارئ في حي بيترفع ممثل. من القطاعات بتترفع للمحليات، إنه برضو العدد بتاع القطاعات أو المجالس بتاعت القطاعات في المحلية بترفع ممثلين بيشكلوا المجلس بتاع المحلية. ومن ثم المحليات كذلك بترفع ممثلين على أساس أنهم هم يشكلوا المجلس بتاع الولاية، وصولا لمجلس تنسيق العمل القاعدي اللي هو بيضم عدد من الممثلين للولايات السودانية. وأيضا أضفنا بعد تشكيل المجلس مجلس تنسيق العمل القاعدي اللي هو بيضم زي ما قلت كل الممثلين من الولايات، أضفنا كذلك عدد من المنظمات المدنية الموجودة في السودان، وأضفنا عدد من المنظمات الدولية بحيث أنه هم ذاتهم يكونوا مشاركين معنا في الشكل بتاع المتابعة والوصول بتاع الاحتياجات والتشكيل بتاع البرامج والتقارير وخلافه. اللي بيميز غرف الطوارئ كذلك انها هي ما عندها اي انتماء سياسي ولا عندها اي تحيز لاي جهه في السودان، خلاف المواطن البسيط اللي هو بيكون محتاج لعده حاجات. يعني غرف الطوارئ في فتره طويله في بدايه الحرب كانت معتمده على الدعومات الذاتية من خلال رجال الأعمال، من خلال المغتربين، من خلال فاعلين الخير، إلى أن بعد فترة طويلة من بداية الحرب في منظمات كثيرة بدأت إنها هي تكون مساعدة في الدعومات. اتميزت غرف الطوارئ بأنها هي حاولت توفر كل الاحتياجات بتاعة المواطنين أو المدنيين، باعتبار إنها هي قائمة من نفس المجتمعات. لأنه إذا قلنا والله يا أخي الممثلين في الأحياء في ولاية الخرطوم بيكون الاحتياجات بتاعتهم بتختلف تماما عن الاحتياجات بتاعت المواطنين في دارفور أو في الجزيرة أو خلافه. كذلك النقطة المهمة أيضا أنه الحرب في السودان زي ما كل الناس متابعة إنها هي بدأت في الخرطوم، وبعد فترة بدأت تنتشر واتمددت في عدد من الولايات. غرف الطوارئ كانت بتستبق الحرب بأنها هي بتشكل غرف الطوارئ في الولايات الما وصلت الحرب أو الما تمددت لها الحرب، بأنهم هم بيكونوا واقفين على النازحين وعلى المهجرين قسريا. فلما توصل الحرب في الولايات الآمنة بيكون أصلا في غرف طوارئ مشكلة وجاهزة لأنها هي تقدر تساعد وتساهم بشكل كبير. الغرف برضو كذلك هي كانت بتقدم يمكن كل الاحتياجات زي ما قلت، من الغذاء، من الصحة، من إدارة المستشفيات والمراكز الصحية، من الخدمات، الكهرباء، المياه، إصحاح البيئة، غيرها من مش بس حتى كده برضو في الدعم النفسي اللي كان بيتقدم برضو كان بيتقدم عن طريق غرف الطوارئ من خلال إنشاء المساحات الآمنة للنساء ومن خلال المساحات الصديقة للأطفال. ويمكن دي جزء بسيط جدا أنا حاجيف هنا وأدي الفرصة للفترة القادمة إنه نعكس جزء أكبر إن شاء الله من إسهامات غرف الطوارئ.
Thank you so much. We often talk about the nexus benefits of the kind of work that the ERRs and folks in Myanmar and elsewhere are doing. But Safaa, your organization in Sudan and Western Darfur is explicit about the fact that you are working across humanitarian, peace, and also development. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and why you think it's so important for that nexus element and for engagement in things like peace to be rooted in, the desires of those communities?
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everybody. I'm really delighted and happy to be here in Qatar. Why Qatar? Qatar for me is not a venue for this workshop. It was the mediator and supporter for the Sudan Darfur Doha Peace Agreement, and I was here as a women activist and civil society leading the women at the peace table. And today, this is Qatar to me, and I know the roads where we protested here. I was in Rataj, Shida, and I was in Sheraton at the peace table, but it was pity that today I came as a refugee, as someone talking about the humanitarian, and seeing all this support and all this, where had it gone? Why I came at this replication and the vicious circle of the peace, of the humanitarian, repeated in Sudan, not only in Sudan, we see other countries also, it is the same, and partial peace, humanitarian, and all this. Thank you for the Qataris, and thanks so much for the Peace Leadership Center and the organizers and all the donors who make it possible for me to come here. This is another story, but also it has a link with the perception of considering you as a refugee or as a actor or as a recipient. This is another issue, but thank you so much for you all. And also this humanitarian, I would like to be here for more time, also not as to say, to follow up with some Qatari who have supported us a lot, and also to know the story from the women, from all of us, but unfortunately, I'm going to leave. This is about the funding issue itself. However, what I would like to say that the mutual funding is about how I used to be an international worker, graduated from the University of Khartoum, and at that time, the humanitarian work and humanitarian catastrophe in the Horn of Africa was there, and Sudan, one of the countries who was hit by the drought. That was at that time I was a student in the university, and we are voluntarily delivering food and working with the IDPs in the Khartoum. That was how we develop our services. But when I graduated, there is no job. There is no the available opportunities for me to work is to work with the international organizations. That's also government has no commitment to employ graduates, to employ. That is part of the whole issues. I was there with Save the Children UK and with Oxfam working with there. I've seen that the tragedy have the women face and the children and the community face. That is the issue. It's always, this is why when you see the community development associations, the name where it came from, it does not come from anything. I work there, but I've seen people are treated as recipients, women, and I am a humanitarian worker. I have a contract and I have a boundaries, just because this is beneficiaries, recipients, and all. I said I have that essence of no. I'm affected. I'm from Darfur, in fact, from Guinea, from one of the regions which also describes the problem and of the Sudan, not only the war of 2006 23, the last war of the 2 years, the war started in Darfur and before in Nuba Mountain, in South Sudan, and that is the vicious circle of war and the vicious circle of the humanitarian. It with a complexity between, we are moving between the acute crisis, where it has a political dimension, and the crisis where that's the humanitarian, there is no services of education, there is no government of commitment, and then being staff in international organization, it comes to time that to cut the staff because people now reach here. It is like we need exit strategy, and people now no longer need support. And just I decided I'm not going to work in any international organization. With due respect for my staff, we need to start to work our own, to use our skills, and that is why CDA come to fill that vacuum. We cannot fill that vacuum, but educated and with other people like me who are educated, have that experience, and then establish community development association to work with the people who are IDPs and uprooted from their rural areas of being producers. Sudan, in fact, women are like other regions in the Africa. Women constitute 70% of the farmers and the production of food, and they are WFP. This is what I always say. Where is this producer go? They are now in camps, and we came and established community development association. Even at the beginning, we have people say, no, don't say community development like it is a minor community. People recognize when in funding, you have to call it foundation. Because say, no, we are from the community and to the community development associations, and we have to work with the women whom I see as recipient on the ground. I'm part of them, and with the others, then establish it. Establish it with the idea of the immediate needs is there. It was being addressed, but also people listed to you, women and other needs, which has elements of development, like education cannot wait, livelihood issues cannot wait, participation of women in the rural areas with the tribal leaders to solve problems cannot wait, and those issues are not cannot be seen in the humanitarian service delivery. Even people think of they need to build schools, or all these things are not considered. Humanitarian think of not a permanent structure, thinking about not permanent structure. Think about a structure that like to build with local materials of non-food items of local materials, which is not are not durable. We start to build on the community to receive people, to build centers in bricks, and with the donation of the local community. We distribute supplement like tools, seeds for the women to cultivate, and we also make a space for women to meet, because there are other needs to talk about their fears, their gender issues, their other people, the other things, other things they of concern. In the humanitarian work, that doesn't only life-saving people. And then we develop a vocational training for the women. We have, unfortunately, I have to have a video here, but it was not again. However, during that, peace process is going on. And those who are fighting, they think that only the fighters, the politicians, have the right to peace, although the peace talk about the dividends of peace and talking about people livelihood, people about the economy, and the real people are disconnected. We think that these women and these people at the community, they are the one who to be at the table, are not disconnected. As a humanitarian worker, I don't see that there is a disconnection. It is about us. We are human beings. Then at that moment, we train women on dialogue and we make an advocacy group from expert women. When I talk about expert women, not necessarily educated, but people know the information have and they are educated women, and we make appeal that these women should be at the peace table. And there are women who are known by the Qataris now from IDP's camp in Sudan. They were part of the peace process, and we push for the civil society to be there. This is critical when we need to have linkages, not to divide the humanitarian work from the peace work, because we are managing diversified issues of women, of people well-being, people sustainability of being governed and participated in their day-to-day issues. Peace it does not belong to the politician and it does not belong to military. Then we managed to do that, and we have cases where women have been graduated, yes, and being part of the local community structure at their villages and have decision. But unfortunately, what comes after this deadly conflict, which spread all the Sudan, of the genocide one, is affected all what has done by us into a fragmentation and all the things looted. However, what I think is for the humanitarian people not to think as independent from other people concerns. Humanitarian, because the humanitarian itself is dependent on the people. People are not depending on the humanitarian. By the way, this is because of the information, someone come after 5 years and become expert. All this information was collected by the people, by the community, and the exerted effort of women leisure time, not going to having informal sector, not having vacancy or holidays. We work tirelessly in the farm, and all this compiled and written in a good proposals and submitted. We are behind that. But I think that, and this is credible and appreciated. But what I think that there is no division between the humanitarian. There is no dislinking between the humanitarian and people concerned about to be in peace. Because if there is no peace, the recovery phase and these protection issues, humanitarian workers cannot work. Underground, now people, despite of all this humanitarian, there are effort of local peace initiatives. This is not supported by the humanitarian, by our own. How can mutual aid continue? Yeah. Okay, however, I can just see that humanitarian, to me, these stories need to be documented. Solidarity is needed and to be taken into consideration in the humanitarian work. This is my message. Thank you.
Thanks, Safaa. And I think an important reminder when we're in a world where people are talking about prioritization based on life-saving only. So thank you for sort of reorienting us back towards the importance of all of those elements. Ahmed, I want to turn to Syria and just to the panel. We are sort of starting to run out of time if we want to have Q&As. So we need to be relatively concise because I want to get back to some of you with the second question. Syria has obviously changed quite drastically since December 8th. And so we'll divide your questions into two. The first part is, could you tell us a bit about what the White Helmets were up to in the last 14 years before December 8th?
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, I'm really delighted to be part of this excellent panel. And I'm truly grateful for the organizers for these interesting sessions and interesting conference. What strikes me yesterday, colleagues, that we are discussing transformative leaders, and we are really proud to see a lot of local leaders attending this. I think this is the beginning of the change that we need. And this is a really very good signs that local actors, local leaders are part of such kind of avenue, conference, in order to voice out the needs of the community. So thanks so much for this opportunity, and thanks for inviting us. Thanks to Qatar State for always having, holding a great conference, such kind of this conference. In terms of White Helmet, you know, colleagues, when I'm introducing myself, usually, when I say that I'm the chief of programs of White Helmet, you know what the first time they always told me? Oh, you know, you have this Oscar film. You are the one who nominated for the Nobel Peace Award. You are the one who got like more than 40 recognized award globally. But behind this great work, there is 3,400 volunteers on the ground. And those is, for me, it's not only volunteers. They are heroes, really heroes. Why I'm insisting in this word heroes? Because I got tired when I'm hearing from donors, foundations, even sometimes NGO, saying capacity building. Sorry, we have a great capacity to share. We have a great capacity to exchange. We don't want anymore to hear this capacity building. Let's change the terminology and say this is capacity exchange. We know the context better than anyone. And there is nothing with capacity building, but let's say capacity exchange and capacity sharing. In this way, we can win-win approach. I'm representing here, and I'm really, really proud, representing more than 3,500 volunteers working on the ground tirelessly to save lives and maintain the safety and security and stabilization for the community in Syria. So past 14 years, colleagues, unfortunately, we lost 10% of our staff, 10%. 319 staff lost their lives, sacrificed their lives for the community, to save the community, to rescue the communities, to take some communities under the rebels or targeted shelling from Russia and Al-Assad regime. So past 14 years, we lost 319 staff, 10% of our staff. I don't think there's any organization that they lost such kind of really huge amount of staff just because they were rescuing others. Therefore, when we're asking ourselves why the community trusts us, because we are very close to the communities, because we are the first responders on the ground. But the trust from the community came, and trust from the donors came first from trust of the communities. And this is always my message to colleagues, all the organization. Don't fight to get the trust from the donors. Go to the community first. When the community trusts you, believe me, all the donors will trust you. Make always your communities in the first target. Make your needs for the communities. And this is what White Helmet, since the outset of the Syria crisis, White Helmet was trying and doing the best in order to address the needs on the ground. Yes, now we are proud by saying we are not doing only search and rescue. We are very much well known for search and rescue. But colleagues, search and rescue is only 10% of our work. We are doing a lot of other things as well. We are now responsible for rehabilitation of roads, health center, schools, and also hospitals. We have a protection team. We are the largest organization doing mine clearance, UXO, and awareness sessions. And also we have programs for building resilience and the climate and disaster risk reductions. We are now proud also to have one specific program for localization. You know why? Because we found our right and our responsibilities as a local actors, and we are also proud to have a direct relationship with the great donors. We need to transfer this knowledge to other local actors as well. It's not only us to be, but we need also other local organizations to transfer this exchange and this knowledge and this experience to them as well. Therefore, we establish localization program. We are local, but also we are working very closely with the communities on the ground in order to empower them. And this is something also we are proud to say we have a human rights program. Our office in Netherlands just only for human rights. And also we are also sometimes we are proud because the most organization got this information from Russia. It's a white helmet. Despite all this, we got the trust. But of course, big thanks, number one, to the communities, and number two, for our donors. Allow me to mention our donors because they stand with us very firmly this 14 years. FCDO, USAID, Qatar Fund for Foundations, France, Denmark, and GFFO. Those these donors really stand very much firmly and supported us despite all this information. When we sent requests to UN to be part of the clusters, they told us, sorry, you are a little bit maybe political. We are not accepting you to be part of the clusters. Okay, there's no problem. We create our clusters. And we create our clusters with the communities. And they start now backing us. We need information from you because you are the only source of the information. Can now you be part of the clusters? I'm sorry. It's too late. So that means you are now the source of power. As the local actors, as the one holding the power on the ground, as much as you are close to the communities, I think now you are the on the driving seats for determining the needs and also getting a lot of fund. Now we have also a lot of evidence through, we have a helmet, and the helmet there is a camera. This camera, filming all the violations from different actors. And all this now we have 100,000 of films will be submitted to relevant entities like for justice and accountability in Syria and for human rights issue. So this is a white helmet. Past 14 years, they have been working really tirelessly in order to support the communities in northwest Syria and doing our best in order to serve across Syria, by the way. Sometimes they heard you are only working in northwest Syria because unfortunately, the old regime, Al-Assad regime, were not allowing us to do so. We were trying our best to serve our community in Damascus, in Homs, in Daraa, and even when the fire happened in Latakia, we submit requests to different entities that we need to respond because the people in Latakia and Tartus and those are our senior communities and we need to serve them. But unfortunately, the regime was not allowing us to do so. So our work is for all Syrians. There is no kind of, discrimination in this aspect.
I want to pick up on that last point. And so on December 8th, there was quite a big shift in Syria. I don't know if you've seen the news. And the old regime fell and things changed quite drastically. And your role changed quite drastically. And you had previously been called quite political and that you only served one part of the country. What happened after December 8th, both in terms of how communities across Syria reacted to your organization, but then also how sort of seamlessly you managed to slot into a longer term recovery or service provision kind of a role. Could you speak a little bit more about that? Because I think it's really useful in terms of how these things shake out in the long term.
It was a little bit surprise, I think, for everyone, not only for Syrians, what happened in 8th of December. But since it was a sort of a dream, we tried our best to put a plan and to deal with this dream, which is now came a reality. So I tell you that since 8th December and at the beginning of March, we were really in emergency mood. 3,500 volunteers. Some of them, they will never go to their family for more than 2 months. With the less resources, with the cut fund from USAID, with the minimum vehicles and equipments, we found ourselves in a very difficult situation because this is our country and we have a responsibilities to build our country, regardless for the fund. We need to build our countries with the whatever resources we have. And this is what we had a meeting as a management. We agreed to start this emergency mood, and we asked all the teams to start and to implement these emergency situations. We start to distribute all over the governorates, and we receive a kind of request from journalists, from different. How did it to manage that with the very, just 2-3 days? But this is our countries. We know how to manage that. It's not about like to go to Tar'a. We don't want to get a permission for anyone to go to Tar'a, even if it's his house. This is our countries. And we know how to go to Tar'a, and we know the community there. It's just to mobilize some resources and to open. So within just 1 week after fall al-Assad, we were able to open 76 centers across the governorates, across Syria. And we start to operate all our services, ambulance, firefighting, search and rescue, as well as we started some kind of community resilience activities within only less than 1 week. And this is the experience we got from the earthquake, colleagues. In the earthquake, we were almost as a Syrian organization. I'm not only saying a white helmet. The Syrian organization were the only actors respond to the earthquake in 2023. Unfortunately, we were not able to get any kind of support from the international communities because of the bureaucracy, because the consent from the border and all these issues. But again, this is represent a case study, how the local actors, if they want to work together, they can do a lot of work. This is not represent only White Helmet. Yes, White Helmet, they're doing a lot of good job, but this is again, hands and also support from other local actors. They came to us during the earthquake by saying, look, this is our resources, this is our vehicles, this is our staff, let's work together. Let's do our job. And we did an amazing job in a place, there is no government. There is no contingency plan, ever into 2023. Therefore, I mean, expanding after the 8th of December was not something difficult for us. We did that, and we managed with really quick things. Very quick lessons learned after this kind of the expansion. I spoke about trust. Again, go trust to the communities, not seek the trust from the donors, and then you will be the winner. And number two, it's about the link between fund and impact. It's not fund and output. When I'm saying that we are proud to rescue 128,000 lives during these 14 years, I'm not saying we implemented 14 or 16 or 100 projects, because the number of projects for us is useless, is meaningless. For us, how many lives we were able to build and to survive. This is the most important things. Complementarity. This is something is very important to complement with each other. What we are trying to do as a White Helmet is not to competing with the other, rather than complementing each other. When we are saying there's no one working the search and rescue, we are the one who is responsible to work in search and rescue. When there's no one addressing the climate disaster, we are the one we have to work in the disaster management. One very important element is the program approach, not a project approach. This is a long term. You can get the trust from the communities when the community they know you are standing along with them the whole period. It's not only for one, like we have some INGO or donor, they said, we can operate or we can fund the school for 1 year. Okay, after 1 year, what happened? Because this school need to be run like for 10 years, for 20 years. We cannot close the school. So we are proud to say that since we started all our services in White Helmet, we never ever cut any service. Like with the health, with the protection, with education, and even with the climate change. This is what we are trying. Of course, much thanks to our donor who believe with us and also support us a lot. I mean, last things from my point. I mean, really last things. Please try always, sometimes, to say no to donor. Be bold and say no. When donors give you a pre-designed project, say sometimes no. We don't want this. We need another things because the needs of the ground said. And this is sometimes what we are doing. When we have some donors provide us with the redesigned project. It just fill the number, say no. I mean, I'm sorry, we cannot work in this. We need to design this project. It's not you design for us because we know the project. So I will stop here. Sorry.
I'm going to take 1, 2 or 3 more minutes from the Q&A to ask some Q&A because I think we need to. We started with Myanmar or Burma being not talked about enough, and it would be very unfair to then not talk enough about your context in this panel. Can you briefly explain? I think there's been something really interesting happening, not just with the local groups responding to the humanitarian needs, but also working together in ways that perhaps haven't traditionally happened over the last couple of decades. Could you talk a little bit about about in particular that latter point? You know, some of this collaboration or cooperation that's happening.
In response to the latest coup, for the first time in Burma's history, people from all walks of life, from a different geographic region, came together, unite under one objective, which is to get rid of the military regime, because they are fed up with having to live under a regime that oppressed them equally. Historically, it's been the case that the regime has largely oppressed the ethnic minorities, the religious minorities. But for the first time, people from the majority group also feel oppressed by the regime. So they came together in unity to get rid of the military regime, and that's how the nationwide revolt against the military came about. And then when the quake hit late last month, we see the existing network of people who have been for the last 4 years trying to help communities across geographic region really came together in solidarity and respond to however they can. Only that the military has been limiting access to different locations. And also, what's very important to highlight here is that the regime was preying on the youth who are trying to respond to the disaster to conscript them into military service because they are losing so many men in the fight. But yet, the resilience of communities proved very useful when natural disaster struck. So there was an existing network of people trying to respond in however ways they can with whatever means they have. And that's how this is playing out on the ground. And again, I can't express enough the fact that it is those who are working directly with communities that we need to reach out to, not through the military regime, because that entails a lot of risk. And we are trying to deal with structural problem. And at the same time that we're trying to solve the current emergency situation, we also need to think about how to apply the help so that people can be helped in a way that sustain beyond military rule. People have hope in the midst of all of this tragedy just because they envision life beyond military rule. And this disaster in some way provide that opportunity where the international community can make a difference by supporting local groups, work and support their, resiliency, support them in a way that strengthen local governance and, give them hope so that they are able to better cope with the situation. Thank you.
Just quickly to you, you've got 1 minute. Sorry. We're often criticized for giving Ukraine too much attention, but on this panel, we have really flipped that dynamic, I think. But you have created some innovative solutions on cold chain and logistics and also siege response. How are you thinking about how those apply to sort of both Ukraine's infrastructure long term, but also, you know, how they could be applied elsewhere in the humanitarian sector?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it has to do a lot with what Ahmed has been saying about focusing on community needs. So that we were focusing on what is actually needed instead of what is approved usually in proposals. And that ignorance of how the humanitarian apparatus worked actually allowed us to establish our own protocols and SOPs that unintentionally was never seen before. So after that, we of course read the Safaa standards. We learn how the UN system works, etc. But from the beginning, we were okay. So we must be accountable and transparent. So we decided, okay, let's do a system where each donor of medication can see where each individual package, which serial number, with which expiry date, went to which patient, with what cancer type, when was the delivery, and all that in real time. It was not a standard. We just thought it was a good idea. Then, okay, when we were announced the big donation of chemotherapy medication, it was a big volume. So we said, okay, let's build an underground missile-proof cold chain warehouse to store this medication. So we read protocols of other organizations. We talked with the logisticians, and we tried to improve that. But again, that came from sort of an ignorance of what everyone else was doing. So yeah, I think that the true localization comes from the actual need, and what Ahmed said, say no to the donor. That's where the push is, actually. That's how we can push localization.
Important. And if you do have a need for an underground missile-proof cold chain storage unit, we will know who to call. Mariana, sorry for taking up the Q&A time. It's okay. Over to you.
So as we told you yesterday, I hope it's very clear who we think are the VIPs in the room and why. So first, a big round of applause for this amazing panel. And if you look at your agenda, this was the longest panel for a very good reason. I personally wish we could go on for another 2 hours. Can people raise hands if you're fine if we use a little more time of the Q&A and have a slightly shorter coffee break? If people are really, that's what I thought. If people are really needing to get out and get a snack or coffee, go for it. We'll start the next sessions. Donna will give us the instructions on time out of respect for the next very important series of panels. But I think having these incredible leaders on the stage right now with an opportunity for questions is probably the most important thing we can be doing with our time. So thank you to all of you, and I'll start taking questions. Yes.
Appreciation is very important. Just for how did we receive funding? We lost our inconvenient like UN fragmentation, but Sarah is here. Our women feminist network. They find us and they sent us like $40,000 through. Yeah, this is the Black feminist through our own personal accounts, because also you should go through this screening and all this. This is a problem, and we raise fund through Dignity and Solidarity Fund, which we think that we can depend also on the community and the people resourcing, not only at the UN and in this conventional funding. Thank you.
So we'll do Bashir first, then we'll do Pavel.
No, thank you. And honestly, it's always kind of like, even though working in this space, but to hear sometimes the stories and the work that you do is phenomenal. So I do actually have a request, which is this peer-to-peer and knowledge exchange. No capacity building, please. Can we drop that term?
Please.
But how can the panelists here be facilitated where they can convene and share this learning across the board, because there's a lot of threads. People talk about mutual aid and solidarity and all of this. They're all doing it. So
Exactly.
how can we do that? The second part, I think, Awad, in terms of what's happening in Sudan and also with Safaa, mutual aid and local organizations have been the front line in the response to Sudan. So just emergency response rooms, and correct me if I'm wrong, Awad, isn't it like 600 emergency response rooms across the country and about 10,000 volunteers? This is vast. And also, and I'll be blunt about it, the international system have failed in Sudan. They've been missing in action. The first convoy, the UN convoy that went into the capital, into Khartoum, since the start of the war was only in December. And that was facilitated by the emergency response rooms. And it's actually, and despite that, they still get the local organizations and the mutual aid groups receive such a small percentage of the funding. Despite, it's all held up in red tape. So I think this needs to be highlighted. What is that red tape? Was it someone was saying, that kind of middle belt. Something disappears. Something is promised from the donors. By the time it gets to mutual aid groups, where does it go? So this is where the issue of accountability needs to be really discussed, and we need to be honest about it.
Thank you for sharing. And just because we're limited on time, we do need to limit questions and comments a little shorter. Because the mic is there, please go to Tamam.
Thank you. I think we've learned a lot today. Thank you, Ahmed, for describing the white helmets' work now and before. I think there has been, there's still, in my mind, a discourse where the mutual aid or the model of the white helmet have been seen as anomalies in a humanitarian system that functions in a singular way, right? And that has allowed for a very long time for the white helmets to be demonized as spies or whatever, because they're funded by the way, the exact same people who fund the Red Cross, but that's beside the point. I think, just my question, how can we take those experiences that are different and local and share the same philosophy and put them in a way that stops them being an anomaly and make them replicable, not replicable the exact way, but the principles that made it function in Syria and in Sudan and in Ukraine in different ways are the same principles. Share those, please, with how can you share those with the wider humanitarian sector so you stop seeing you as anomalies, but as a feasible norm to be used elsewhere. Thank you very much.
And the title of this session is, what do we call it? Local Leader Spotlight, Leading from the Front, the Humanitarian Vanguard. The whole idea, this is the vanguard. This is the humanitarian response. And I think on both Bashar and Tamam's point, I think putting energy and resources into mapping that learning, creating the peer-to-peer collaboration, and having a multitude of small S systems around the world guided by similar principles is what we're talking about when we talk about the future of humanitarianism. And I think we're in mostly agreement that the one-size-fits-all approach, someone said one size fits nothing. And I think what we see here is each of these different leaders has spoken about things that worked in their context that will not be able to be copy pasted from one place to the next, but there are principled learnings within that are extremely powerful. Pav.
Hello, I'm Pavamania from Humanitarian Leadership Academy. I have a question for Ross, because there's so much talk about like the ceasefire, right, in Ukraine. So if this ceasefire, let's call it, is agreed, so what does it mean for organizations that are the front line, like Mission Kharkiv and other organizations? Because there's so much excitement in the media about what can happen, but actually what it means for a lot of local organizations, but that's across all contexts. It means that you have to pivot your work, the focus is shifting. So yeah, what does it mean actually for organizations like yours and others that work on the front line in Ukraine, if anything?
Thank you. Well, first of all, we don't believe in any ceasefire right now, the majority of Ukrainians. But when this war comes to an end, we will definitely continue our work in Ukraine, first of all. And we already have many requests from different contexts to share our experience that we gained in Ukraine due to our unique appearance in the context, right? In Lebanon, for example, Mali, Malawi, there is still need for chronically ill people, NCDs, oncology patients, and that will perpetuate and continue if we don't do anything about it, right? When an oncology patient arrives to a refugee camp, so what is life-saving activity? Giving him a hygiene kit or providing an oncology treatment? So we would love to share our experience, SOPs, and protocols. That's what we do.
Thank you. We will go here first.
Hi, my question is for Mr. Ahmed about the trust. We know that the Syrian regime was spreading false news about the white hamlets, that they are not working, and this is all propaganda. Now, after 8th of December, are you facing any difficulty gaining the trust of locals who have been, or let's say, they are with the Syrian regime? And also, were you able to say no to the donors at the beginning of the war?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. Quick answer. One of the critical program what we did after the 8th of December, it's we start awareness session, and we did some kind of conference meetings with different communities. Like we visited all the governorates, we visited all the universities, institutions in Syria, just to share the thoughts, who we are, what we are doing, and just to counter what the regime was announcing and Russia announcing against us. And surprisingly, that we found that colleagues, like more than 60% of the Syrian community with the regime, they don't have any problem with us. Rather than they are supporting our work, and they have this something good. We have almost like 25%, they hate us, which is, I mean, it's a super normal that you have some of the community, they heard a lot of bad things about you as spies, as a one who like supporting from Al-Qaeda or different entities, and which is, it's not mixed with each other, but you know, this is what the regime and Russia was doing. And the rest of the communities they don't know anything about us. So therefore, one of the critical program, and could be a lessons learned for like other crises, go and speak with the community directly. Speak to the community and give them a sense who we are, what we are doing, and what type of services, and how we can build the Syrian together. Yes, we were able to say no, and this has happened just 2 weeks back when some donors for X project, they share with us a pre-designed project just to fill numbers, and we say no, it's easy. We said a lot of no, yes, for sure, but I can guarantee you, when you are working closely with the community as with unique programs, definitely the donor will come back to you. We changed a lot of our ambulance vehicles because they don't meet with our criteria. We don't want old vehicles to come to Syria. We know the very good standards to come to our country, and this is our right. So sometimes we say no, we don't want this program, we don't want these activities, and we know because we know the needs on the ground. Yeah.
Just for those that aren't following Syria as closely as some of us, what's interesting, and I think an important lesson for other, let's say, resistance actors or other local entities, this problem of disinformation in our modern age there is a lot of evidence about how disinformation in the media is being used to undermine movements. I think Zaouk talked about this as well. Unknowing internationals may think, let's give money to the Myanmar context, and meanwhile, it's being weaponized against the people. The white helmets, I'm speaking about this, this was my job for 1 year. The white helmets were the best case study of how the Russian state invested endless resources in taking them. The most common search term about the white helmets in 2014 and 2015 was white helmets hero. By 2016, 2017, the narrative had shifted because of the disinformation. It was white helmets terrorist. Imagine what that does to an organization's legitimacy on the international stage and what that can then do. And maybe just for 1 second, Ahmed, can you also, I think a very important part of this success story, can you explain Raed's new role? Raed's new role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what I already wrote here, but I forget to mention that Raed was selected from the government after a lot of discussions to be a minister of the disaster and emergency management ministry in Syria. And the things that I'm sure no one of you know that, right before this appointment, he was visiting ex-countries. And he was in a meeting with one of the senior leaders in these countries. And he told Raed, if you will be in this position, we will not allow you to go and to come to us. And this will be a problem. And Raed's response was, no, I'm serving my country and I will be in the position. And even if will not live in country, I will stay in Syria. So this is something, how much you are be close again to the aim and goal you are fighting about. And this is again recognition for the role of White Helmet and Syria Civil Defense to form with a new legitimate government in Syria to take one of very important ministry now. It's even a new established ministry. It's for emergency and disaster, and this ministry will take a lot of responsibilities. So we are proud our director now a minister in the new government. The government really we are disannounced and legitimate government.
I hope that those of you who are still fighting the fight in your countries, in Myanmar, Burma, Sudan, Ukraine, can take a lot of encouragement from this wild story from, December 7th. Every Syrian I knew was watching and still believing they could never have hope that this regime would change. As difficult as the time of war is, I hope that you have a chance to speak with each other and learn some lessons of hope. Quick one here, and then I've got a few other people teed up for questions.
Thank you very much, Othman Muqbil, CEO Action for Humanity. I wanted Ahmed first to congratulate you but Mariana before me, she reminded you about the point. So congratulations again, well deserved. So what I for the last 2 decades, I advocate for the local partners. Although I'm a CEO of global INGO, but our registration in most of the countries are locals. So what I want to say here that the many INGOs really failed to establish genuine partnership with the local partners. And most of the time they deal with them as subcontractors. And this is something I think from this conference, I want to suggest to be very clear in the recommendation of the conference that we need to change this kind of attitude. Let me just remind you of 2 things. One is the grant bargains. The last reports now, evaluation of grant bargains from 2016, that the 25% localization funding, as of today, directly from the INGOs reach less than 5%, and indirectly maybe around 10%. So we still very behind. Yesterday, I wanted to challenge Gates Foundation's representative here about localization, but there was no chance. Maybe we can talk later, but it's really reports now. If you do just a very simple Google research, and there are some documented, very clear with evidence that they are not doing enough. Occasionally, they work with local partners, but most of the money goes, but most of the funding goes via INGO. So my recommendation, I don't have a question, but my recommendation, I think, that we need maybe to have a clear recommendation from the conference and to think about what kind of advocacy and lobbying we can do more, because we celebrate these success stories, but what can we do to let them continue these excellent stories?
One point on that. We could have spent the whole conference talking about the money. We could have spent the whole conversation talking about the failures of the promise of the grand bargain. What we're challenging us to do in this room is stop looking there for the salvation or the funding or the whatever. It's done. Let's create something new. I am frankly done making recommendations about we know that the donors should be giving more funding, but I think what you're hearing here is that even when there is no international funding or support and the international community is absent, local leaders are the vanguard and they're finding a way anyway. And that is what we're trying to say. So I let Omar next and this one up here. I'll be walking this. So
No
keep
worries.
talking.
Mariana, my question basically to Ahmed, but I don't want to take more time because I mean, we spoke about Syria a lot, so I will give the question to someone.
Yes, there is a Syria workshop. It's going to be amazing. If you're interested in more about Syria. Okay, come on.
My name is Yembwani Yves Woba. I came from Burkina Faso for local NGOs who's called Association Tintois. And Tintois means self-made man or self-made woman. I just want to say it's great to see you on the panel. And I think we're talking about capacity building or capacity sharing. I think something is missing for local leaders is kind of training that CHL make with their SLH or Gailey also makes that kind of training. We are most trained ourselves on operational, no on leadership, no on coordination. How you can sit there and discuss, how you can say no to a donor if you are not trained. You need to build our capacity on leadership and also in coordination. We need to be around the table everywhere we discuss about community serving. We need to be there. Most of the time, we are not around the table. When we are not around the table, it means you are on the menu. We need to be out of the menu. We need to decide what the menu is going to be. Thanks.
Well, selfishly, I would be remiss if I didn't explain, if you didn't know already, that's basically all we do is the Center for Humanitarian Leadership is support local leaders. So for those in the room who have not attended, you're always welcome to our trainings. For those of you who have funding, you can hear the demand. And I think leadership, that's our whole reason for existence. We agree with you. Leadership, not operational capacity building, endless hamster wheel of training, but enabling leaders to rise to the challenges they face and their unique context. Way up at the top, this will be the last question.
Thank you. My name is Faith Cooper, Regional Director with the International Rescue Committee and also Chair of the U.S. Refugee Advisory Board. I really want to thank the panel. I mean, incredible recommendations, but I want to build on the comms piece and comms with respect to advocacy. There is a famous African proverb that says, until the lion rises up and tell its story, the hunter will always have the best story. You all have given some wonderful recommendations, but are you working, whether it's your internal comms, external comms, or Pledge for Change? Yesterday, there was an excellent session on communications. How are you working to get these recommendations externally so that they become more actionable versus hearing conference after conference? We could come back here in 5 years and hear the same thing. But how do we take these set of recommendations and ensure that they are actionable as we move forward? Thank you.
Does anyone on the panel want to answer that in 1 minute? So
I mean, just quickly, I mean, I completely agree with you. It should be shared, scale up, and replicated in other contexts. For White Helmet, we have one of the very qualified team for advocacy. So we have our office in DC just for advocacy. It's not about doing any program, but just to share what we have on the field to the wider communities. And I really kindly advise you to go and visit our website. You will see a lot of success stories, our case studies. So we have our website, and as well as we have our advocacy and communication team that they are working tirelessly in order to share all this information with the wider community.